Hey everyone, my name is Brent Stromwall. I am an Iron Forums member. I'm glad to be sharing with you today a little bit about what I've learned and been revealed to me about love. Jesus says that loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind is the most important thing. And then he says this, loving your neighbor as yourself is just like it. And to me, that's just a little bit confusing. I just find it really, really hard sometimes to love myself and really hard sometimes to love my neighbors. I mean, I make mistakes, I sin, I do stupid things, and all of that makes me feel shame, even anger toward myself and guilt. It's hard to love myself when I'm in that state. And then there's other people. Let's start with my wife, Leanne. I've been married to her over 30 years. We have a great friendship, best friend in my life. And sometimes, I'll just admit, it's hard to love her. Same with my kids, Sawyer and Hudson. They're fantastic. We have great relationships too, but gosh, I have days when it's just difficult to know how to love them. Then there's other family members. Just be candid, some of them are unlovable as far as I'm concerned, right? How do I love them? Then there's friends, neighbors, even fellow churchgoers. Churchgoers sometimes seem to be more like Eeyore than Jesus, so how do I love that? And then there's work. And I've got partners and coworkers and employees, and gosh, they have a bad day, I have a bad day. Gosh, it is really difficult to love some of those folks. And the employees, some of them that we have, gosh, we hired them for skills and abilities, definitely not temperament or personality on some of them. It's hard to love them. Well, it's interesting that Jesus even sets the bar higher than that. He said we're supposed to love our enemies. All of those categories that I just mentioned sometimes fall into my enemy mode. Leanne and our kids even sometimes are my enemy. They cause me pain or hurt, and I want to defend myself or attack back or just run away. But I'm supposed to love them. How? How do I do that? Important thing is that love counts most. And there's a couple of things that I'm just going to bring in here that remind us of that. First off, 1 John 4:18, we know that God is love. And then there's a bunch of stuff that Paul gives us in the letter to the Corinthians. The first letter, chapter 13, I think everyone knows that it's the love chapter. He tells us what love is, what isn't. He reminds us that if he has not love in anything that he does, then he gains nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it's all those kinds of things. And then he reminds us at the end of the chapter that love never fails. In fact, in verse 13, he says, when everything else will fall away, the only three things that are going to remain are faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these? Love. So love is a really big deal. Let's dig into this and go to the letter Paul wrote to the churches in Galatia. In chapter 5 of the book of Galatians, he says the only thing that matters is faith expressing itself through love. The only thing that matters is faith expressing itself through love. And he's reminding the churches there in Galatia that we're free in Christ, so we don't have to be bothered with the law and what we're doing or not doing. What we should be concerned with is how we are loving each other and loving others. And then later in verse 14, he says, in agreement with Jesus, which I think is a good thing that Paul agrees with Jesus, hey, the law is fulfilled in one word. Love your neighbor as yourself, repeating what Jesus told us. Then he goes through the fruit of the Spirit and starts out with, wouldn't you know it, love. Love is a big deal. It's really important. But how do we love? How do we love ourselves and at the same time love others? If I keep going through this chapter and into chapter 6, we run into some things that Paul writes that just kind of give me pause to consider what, and I want to dig into that. So for example, in chapter 6, verse 2, Paul writes this, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. He just told us what the law of Christ was back in chapter 5, verse 14. It is, love your neighbor as yourself. So does that mean I drop everything and just carry other people's burdens? Do I do nothing else? Then in verse 5, he gives us another command. And he said, each one should carry their own load. Okay, so this is the confusing part for me. I'm supposed to help carry other people's burdens and at the same time carry my own load? Aren't those kind of the same thing? And does that mean I'm just piling everything on my shoulders and I'm supposed to carry all of it? It seems confusing and maybe even contradictory. So I'm not quite sure how to explain all of that, but I'm going to do my best. Keep in mind, this just as a footnote here, this comes from a book called Boundaries by Doctors Henry Cloud and John Townsend. So I just want to make sure that they get credit for what they provided for us in that book, and I highly recommend it, by the way. Well, let's talk about that carry our own load. It turns out that the Greek word used for load is fortion. Fortion is actually a shipping term. And you wonder, why is he using this? So think of who he's writing to, the churches in Galatia, which is modern-day Turkey, with the Black Sea to the north and the Mediterranean Sea to the south. The society, the economy, these people knew shipping. It depended upon shipping. So for him to use this term, fortion, is really relevant to them in their lives. And this word, fortion, means cargo or the lading of a ship. So they get it, right? Everyone should carry their own cargo, basically. He's kind of drawing an analogy that they can resonate with that means a ship is designed to carry a certain cargo and load, and so are we. We are designed by God to carry a certain cargo or load. That's our responsibility. And in fact, there's a purpose that He has for us. And He wants us to fulfill that purpose, and so He's equipped us and given us everything we need to fulfill His purpose in our lives. The interesting thing is that means I'm responsible for everything that I can handle. What Paul is saying is I'm supposed to carry my own load. We all are supposed to carry our own load. We're responsible. The next word that he uses is carrying each other's burdens. The term for burdens in the Greek is the word baros. Baros is defined as a heaviness, a heavy weight. It's more than I can handle, is basically the idea. So I'm supposed to carry my own load and at the same time help carry other people's burdens. So if someone has something in their lives that they just can't handle or carry, I should be helping. Keep in mind, they're still supposed to carry their own load. So what this does is it causes me to be available for them. I'm responsible for my own load, but I'm also available to help when they have something in their lives that they just can't handle. So a good analogy for this that just helps bring this home for me is a movie I saw several years ago. It's called The Finest Hours, and it's about this ship that's making its trek from Baton Rouge up to Boston. It's the SS Pendleton. If you've seen it, you know what I'm referring to. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you the plot. Ship is designed and to carry a load. It's coming up into the Boston area or Massachusetts, hits this big storm, 40 to 60 foot waves. The hull ends up cracking. Eventually, it splits in half. The guys in the ship, the sailors, they send out an SOS. And there's one guy, his name is Bernie Weber. He's in the Coast Guard, he's a petty officer. He decides he's going to volunteer to go out and try to save these guys. In a 40 to 60 foot wave storm, he's got a 32 foot lifeboat. It's designed to carry 12 men, and he's one of them. He goes out there and ends up rescuing 32 men off of the ship. He was available. He decided to make himself available to go help somebody who couldn't handle what they were going through. That's availability. So I'm just supposed to be responsible, carry my own load, and available and help others with their burdens. Is that it? Well, there's some implications here that Paul's given that aren't written directly, but I want to dive into those as well. So the next word I want to share with you is vulnerable. If we're going to help each other carry our burdens, then we need to be able to know what's going on, right? We need to throw out that SOS signal when we come into some life circumstance that we just can't handle. So are you vulnerable in a way that you admit your limitations, or maybe your mistakes, or the burden that you're bearing? We have pain. It's hard sometimes for us to express that and let others know about it. But a healthy community is one that expresses its vulnerability and the pain when we just can't handle enough on our own. The fourth word I want to share with you is empower. Empower comes from the carry our own load statement. If I'm supposed to carry my own load, that means you're supposed to carry your own load. That's on you, not me. I'm not going to come over there and carry your load for you. I'm empowering you. And in this way, I'm helping you become mature and complete the way God designed you, so that you can fulfill the purpose that He has for you. So I'm empowering you to become the person God wants you to be and do the works that He wants you to do. If I jump in and start carrying your load for you, I can undermine God's plan for you. So I need to check myself and discern whether or not I should even help. God's purpose and load for us needs to be carried by us. So those four words together make an acrostic: responsible, available, vulnerable, and empower. RAVE, R-A-V-E. You know that God designed us to be responsible and take on a certain load. He wants us to be available to help others when burdens come in their lives that they just can't handle. He wants us to be vulnerable, expressing our pain and limitations. And He wants to empower one another by making sure we don't come in and carry other people's load. So let's talk a little bit about how this plays out in our lives. I am uniquely created. I have certain abilities that God wants me to use. One of them happens to be math. I'm pretty good at it. Leanne, on the other hand, that's my wife, her head smokes if she starts thinking about math. So she does all the finances in our house. No, I do all the finances in our house, right? It's easy for me. And I know it's kind of weird. I kind of enjoy it. But that's my unique ability. I'm responsible for that. And there's other things, other examples that I could give you where she and I have worked out who's responsible for what. And so we're taking that. That's our load. In the same way, at work, I'm going to be responsible and take ownership for what I need to take ownership for. But do I know what I need to take ownership for? Is that clear to me? Even more so, is it clear for my employees? Is it clear for your employees? Do they understand what they're supposed to be doing at work? Do they have clarity about what you expect of them? I can say, as a business leader, one of your responsibilities is to make sure that everyone else knows theirs. And if someone is doing or not doing what you think they should be doing, it probably, most often than not, is my experience when I'm working with businesses, it comes down to leadership. They just haven't communicated it well. They don't have the clarity. And so expectations are being missed. People are getting disappointed. And so my recommendation is, before you look at them for what they're not doing, look in the mirror and see if you're doing what you're supposed to do as a leader. We love others by doing our part. How about being available? What does that look like? I have a really quick story. I hope this helps. When Leanne was pregnant with our son, she had to go to the hospital 12 weeks ahead of time before he was due. She ended up being on bed rest for 3 months. I just figured I'll just hunker down and take care of everything I need to take care of in the house that she can't do. It means I've got to stop traveling. I just went through all these iterations of what I needed to do. The next day, after we got home from the hospital, our neighbor comes over and she gives us a piece of paper. It's a calendar. And she had written down every other day all of our neighbors who were going to bring us dinner for 4 months. They covered us for those 3 months, plus a month after our son was born. It makes me cry now. Just how available our neighbors were to love on us when we needed it. Something I didn't even realize I couldn't handle on my own, they knew it. How about at work? Are you available at work? Are you too much in a hurry or have too many other responsibilities to even be available to help others? Are you not helping others at home or in your neighborhood or at your church? Hurriness actually hinders our availability. And we live in a culture and society that promotes hurriness, right? Taking on more responsibility, doing more things that is, quote, valuable or your value. But really, is that helpful? Can you help other people with their burdens if you are so maxed out yourself? Think of the Good Samaritan. On his way on a business trip, he had time to stop and take care of a guy who was laying by the side of the road. Do you have time to stop on your journeys throughout the city or metro area? The next word is vulnerable. How are we vulnerable? I have mistakes. I know some of you find that hard to believe, but I make mistakes. And I have limitations. We all do. Do we accept those? And do we communicate those? And do we express those to those around us? And is it a safe environment for others to do the same? If an employee expresses their limitations, do you take their knees out from under them and tell them to get back to work? Or are you leaning in with curiosity and asking, what's going on? How can I help? A safe environment opens the door to vulnerability. And if we don't have a safe environment at home and a safe environment at work, vulnerability is non-existent. And then finally, empower. What does empower look like? If you swoop in and take care of other people's issues or take care of your kids' homework or whatever responsibilities they have, then are you really empowering them to carry their own load? I want to read a verse from James 1, verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If you're coming in and taking somebody else's load, you're not allowing that to happen. They need to endure the trials so that they can become mature and complete, not lacking anything. It's God's will for them, God's will for us to endure trials. It's part of our load that we need to carry. A love that raves is responsible. It carries its own load. It's available, helping others, and actually have margin to help others with their burdens. It's vulnerable, admitting limitations and mistakes and pain. And it empowers others to be responsible so that they become mature and complete. Imagine what it would look like at home if everyone there was carrying their own load and helping each other with their burdens. Imagine what it would look like at church. Oh, wow. Everyone was carrying their own load and helping each other with their burdens, those things they can't handle. What about work? How awesome would the workplace be if everyone was being responsible, available to help for those things that they couldn't handle, vulnerable to express them and admit them, and then empowering others to go do what they're supposed to do? The world would be a different place if we all just heeded Paul's advice and carry our own load and help others with their burdens. Go rave on yourself and someone else. This is how we can love ourselves and our neighbors at the same time.